Alright, so for the next shot of this interior, I'm going to try to shoot the other way. I've already got a shot coming into this space. Now this time I want to look back and I want to get some of this height right in the ceiling. This goes almost 3 floors all the way up, and you can see the stairs ascending 3 stories up in the back of the photo. Now, the composition to me is rather obvious after being in the space, but I'll show you why I'm settling on this general area for the shot. If I'm over here in this part of the kitchen looking this way, almost opposite where we were for the previous photo, I get the outdoor space, but what I don't get is the height of this living room. As you can see, the ceiling actually comes in and blocks us, and if I get close enough to get rid of that, everything is going to be so distorted and wide as to be almost unusable. If I stand in the middle here and try a 1-point perspective, again, I run into the same problem. This cut in the ceiling is coming over and blocking us from seeing up into the hallway above. Now, of course, I can come back even further, but I think you'll know why this doesn't work. There's a light bar right in the way. And the further I get, the more that ceiling blocks the view to the above. Now I'm in my favorite corner again, and you can clearly see all of the height of this space, and you can see the stairs back there, which I think is a great detail. In all of the other spots, we were sacrificing not only the height of this room, but also the stairs. And so I know that the best shot is going to be somewhere right in here. Another thing I like about this is it lets you see where we were for the last photograph, and you can put them together and understand the space a bit better. So I'm going to take a shot right here, and this is going to be our starting point. So there's a few obvious problems here, right? That couch looks stretched and enormous. I mean, 30% of this photo is a couch, right? So I'm thinking we can get a little bit closer, put the camera maybe right here, and let that couch move underneath the frame. And maybe I can use the pillows to sort of frame the shot rather than have the entirety of this couch right in front of the camera. So if I get closer to the couch and lower, the other benefit of that is that it's going to get rid of this sort of blank wall on the right-hand side. I don't need to tell the viewer exactly how big this space is. I can let them use their imagination, and for all they know, it might be a little bigger. We're just going to kind of cleverly omit something to make the space look a bit bigger than it really is. So I'm going to get the camera closer and tighter, and we're going to see what happens. All right, I'll take another test shot here. I'm liking this a lot better. Now, it's still a little bit goofy. I'm going to crop some of the bottom off, right, because that couch is so huge. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to pull it a little bit closer to the camera to hide some of it, to open the shot up a little bit more. I don't really want to see that there's like an alleyway down the right-hand side of the photograph where I see behind the couch. I don't want that. So what we're going to do, we're going to get this couch to move maybe a foot back and to the right. And I've got some really handy furniture sliders in my bag that we can use. This thing looks like it's heavy as all get out. So we're going to slide this couch a little bit back to the right to get it in the perfect spot. Again, I am composing around the things I cannot move. And as I talk through this, I see one more thing I like to change. In the upper left corner, there is that sort of angled corner where the balcony meets the ceiling. And I'm going to pivot just a little bit to make sure I get that in the shot and complete that angle. And that has the added benefit of getting rid of that extra wall on the right-hand side. So I'll frame it right there, and I'll show you that. And remember, I'm going to crop some of that couch out as well as move it back so it's not going to seem so enormous. So, all right, Colin, if you can grab the furniture sliders, we'll get to work here. All right, so that can come a little more, like a nudge. There we go. Okay. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to take an updated shot after we've moved the couch. And it still looks a little bit goofy, but again, keep in mind, I'm going to crop and I'm going to rearrange some of these pillows so they're not so chunky right in front of the camera. So first of all, I'm going to take this blanket off and get this out of the way for now. And I'm just going to pack these down a little bit more so that they're not so massive right in front of the camera. Let's see how this looks. That is a big improvement there. So now I'm happy with the foreground, knowing that I'm going to crop. The next issue I see is that there's a real lack of color on this photo. As you'll remember, we kind of removed all the plants for the last one because they were visually confusing. But I see a great spot for that big plant that we pulled out. So I'm going to put it back behind that chair that's directly in front of the camera, and we're going to add a little bit of color to that wall. This is a much more monotonous photograph because we don't have that window in the back with all those shrubs behind us. So we're going to move the plant back in. Perfect. Yeah, that looks really good. What I'm also going to do is we're going to rotate those books so that the spines are facing the camera. So there's this giant table that I'd like to move a little bit closer to the couch so it feels a bit more balanced. We're going to have all of us jump in there and move this 500-pound behemoth of a table real quick. All right, so as we get ready to finish off the shot, I've noticed I made a little bit of a mistake. We can probably work through it though. I've left some of these interior lights on, and I really prefer to shoot with the lights off during the day. But there is this really cool chandelier up here, and I do like how those LEDs, it shows the viewer that there's an interesting light there, and that it's not just some sculptural piece hanging down. So we're gonna leave the chandelier lights on, but I'm gonna turn the cans off. So Colleen, if you can turn off the cans, we will get our shot wrapped up. Okay, so I turned the can lights off and left the chandelier on. Let's see how that looks. And I think we're ready to go. So again, because we have plenty of natural light, what I'll be doing is running a bracket. My base exposure is 1/20th of a second, f11, ISO 200. I'm gonna go 2 stops up and 2 stops down from there. All right, that's the shot. Let's jump into post-production and see how this is gonna look. So here we are in post-production again with our living room image. As you can see, we have our brackets laid out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And before we get too deep into this one, I wanna make a quick note about consistency between your images. Now, your images should look somewhat similar from shot to shot, right? If you have one image that's white balanced at 3000 and one that's white balanced at 5000 right next to each other, your client's gonna be like, why is this one warm? This one's cold, this is orange, this is blue. The rooms should look relatively consistent. And before we start editing this, we're gonna pick the exposure that we're going to work on. And we're not gonna get into like the crazy blending yet. We're gonna keep things relatively simple, just like the last image. But I do wanna make sure that our images are consistent color and light-wise from shot to shot. Now, of course, the lighting throughout the day will change, and our images that, as we move towards sunset, will get a little darker, a little moodier, have a little more golden light and warmth, but the change should be believable throughout the set. So since it looks like these were shot in mostly the same light as the last image, I'm just gonna go look at the last image here and check the white balance. And that was 45, 50, and 24 on the tint. So I'm gonna take that white balance and I'm going to apply it to the image that we're going to edit. Now my approach here is relatively similar. We got 45, 50, and 24. So yeah, 45, 50, and 24. And of course, if you want these to be consistent because they were shot in more or less the same or very similar light, we can match their exposures in Lightroom before we bring them into Photoshop. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab this and drag it to our current working folder. And I'm gonna go ahead and select the 2 images we've chosen. And I'm going to click, gotta make sure you're in the develop module now. So click D or click on this develop module. Go to settings and match total exposures. And now you can see that the exposures have been matched, right? Now this feels a little bit darker. So I don't think we need to go down to 0.88, but maybe like, we'll drop it half a stop here in Lightroom. And you can click back and forth and you can see that those exposures look relatively consistent from here, from this area, to out here. So there is some sort of cohesion between images in terms of color temperature and exposure. So let's go ahead, I'll get these out of the way. And we're gonna start our edit work on this image. Now, it's bothering me right now, it's probably bothering you. This couch feels ridiculous. So just to give you an idea of what it's gonna look like, as soon as we crop that couch, the whole image changes, right? Remember, on location, we put that couch right in front of the camera and it got distorted, the Kingdom Come. We're just gonna pretend to ignore that because without the crop, the image is not that great. So when we're editing this, pay no attention to the couch. As usual, I'm gonna pull the highlights down, pull the shadows up just a touch, so that I have a nice balanced file to work with in Lightroom. I'm thinking like that is right about where I want to be for my overall exposure. That looks really good. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop 2021. So right off the bat, when I look at this picture, it feels really cool. I want this to be not blue, but I want it to be neutral, and I love showing warmth in my images, like a real subtle warmth. So we're gonna fix this blue. We're gonna do it really quickly and easily, similar to how we did it on the last image. We're gonna grab the lasso tool, and I'm just gonna roughly sort of cut out with this lasso what I find to be too cool for my tastes. And it's almost this entire foreground, right? And yeah, so I'm gonna make my selection. Again, I'm not being perfect with this. My edge is feathered. I'm gonna add a new solid color layer. It's gonna be white. I'm gonna change the blend mode to color. I'm gonna drop the opacity to, like, I don't know, try 40%. And you can see it is a subtle change. You can really see it in the wood there. But all of this, if I go to 0 here, you can really see it. That really cool white has sort of been neutralized. And I think that's too far. So again, I'm going to drop the opacity down to like 40%. And where I think we've gone overboard, I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to paint out the areas on my mask where I don't want that color correction to come through. Again, big soft brush. That's pretty much my motto at this point. Big soft brush. Set the foreground color to black with a %100 opacity. Paint out some of that neutral color layer where we don't need it. And you can hit backslash here to see where you're working. And the couch and the table may be a little cool. That's going to be fixed. And because, again, we're using that soft brush to blend together, we have the hard edges and the soft brush. Let's check our work. Really subtle. You can see it in the painting, right? See the blue in that painting as I turn this on and off? Now, this feels very sterile and neutral. Like I said, I like warmth in my images. So I'm going to Command click this mask. I'm going to hit Command Shift I to invert it. And I'm going to make a new color layer. Again, solid color. This time, instead of white, I'm going to add color. I'm going to add a little bit of warmth. So I'm going to pick like a yellow orange, a late afternoon sunshine color, because we shot this in the afternoon. The sun's starting to get lower on the horizon. You're getting that nice warm glow. I'm going to change the blend mode to color. This looks absurd. I'm going to change the luminosity. Sorry, I'm going to change the opacity to 10%. That looks a lot less absurd, but still a bit much. Probably go down to like 7%. And you can change the opacity with the number keys. That looks pretty nice, right? You can see how much warmer it's made the foreground. I don't want this everywhere. I don't need so much of it on the couch. So I'm going to take the brush and I'm going to, at 50% opacity, paint out like half of that warmth in the foreground. And I'll turn that on and off. And I'll click our mask, and you can see where that warmth has remained, wherever it's revealed, right? Mostly up in the stairwell where that warm light's coming through, and in some of it in the foreground. And you can see how much we've changed the sort of overall mood and feel of this image. Very subtle adjustments, and you can be as heavy-handed as you want with this. You can change the blend mode if you want. You can change it to hue, color, luminosity. There's a lot of different things you can do. You can even go with multiply or overlay. overlay will give us slightly different effects. You can see it there again, on, off, on, off, on, off. Whatever you prefer. But again, just very subtly adding a little warmth here and there, changing the color to sort of give a little life to this image. I'm looking for like a nice golden sunrise color. Sunset, rather. And this is how I sort of add that warm life into my pictures. So again, just like the last shot, there's a lot of sort of warts that I want to pull out. But before I do that, I'm going to add contrast. So I'm going to grab a curves adjustment layer down here. Let's see what auto does for us. We're going to go with a preset here. Medium contrast, and you can see what a big difference that makes. It's almost gone too far in some areas. So I can reduce the opacity of this layer. Can brighten it up with that, dragging that curve there. I don't think we need so much shadow, and it kind of turns our plant black. So I think a little bit goes a long way, right? Look at that. Okay. That's looking good. I'm going to paint out some of this color on the railing up here. Looks a little too warm. So I'll take like a 30% opacity brush. Yeah, and just sort of work some of that gray back in. Again, soft brush is my key to everything here. And there you can see what I've done. So I'm going to group all these together. I'm going to shift click and hit Command G and then turn on and off our work. And it goes from this really cool, like cold, sterile, modern thing, and it feels a bit warmer, a bit more inviting, very subtle, very gentle touches. So I'm going to go ahead and Command Alt Shift E, flatten all to a new layer, and start my cleanup with the things I don't really want in the picture. Shift F5, by. Look at that, is insane. So good. So amazing how good Photoshop has gotten at content-aware fill. It used to be a joke. Now I use it on like every picture I edit. Here we've got a bit of a tricky edit. We'll see what content-aware does. I would be shocked if it got this right. Pretty incredible, but I'm going to have to clean it up with the clone tool here. So I'll just grab a big soft brush, and I'm just going to pull some of it in there. Let's get up here. For these weird, distorted, another great thing about removing some of these objects is they are clues to distortion. And by removing them, you kind of fool the viewer into thinking that your images are not that distorted, especially in these odd areas where it's going to be tricky to correct that. Like when you're looking up into something with a tilt shift lens, or something's right above the camera and things get stretched out, it's sometimes easier to just remove them than change your composition. So lastly are these speakers down here. And forgive me if these aren't absolutely perfect. I'm moving at a blistering pace here. Okay, so there is our Photoshop work on this image. I'm gonna go ahead and save this back into Lightroom and put our finishing touches on it. So let's go ahead and crop a bit. I'm gonna see if I can get away with a 4:5 aspect ratio here. And yeah, I think that's gonna work. And it's so much better when you get rid of that distorted couch, isn't it? A little piece of sensor dust I missed in here. Lightroom has a really great clone tool as well. If you hit the Q key and then A, it will show you where your sensor dust is, and it's super easy to get rid of them. So Q for clone in Lightroom, and then A will give you that high contrast sensor dust view. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the guided transform tool again and make sure our lines are nice and straight. Okay, that's looking really good. I'm gonna give this a little vignette. I feel like that couch is really bright. And you can see again, I'm getting that same sort of effect that I got in the last image where I darkened that piece of foreground to add a little bit of depth. Just helps that pop a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead, maybe like a touch of contrast. I think that's done. So that is, and as you can see here, it's an image that has some very subtle color variations to add a little bit of life. Again, I hate feeling like I live in one of those cheap styrofoam coolers. In my photos, I like to have a bit of color, a bit of warmth, a bit of mood. I find people really respond well to that rather than just sucking all of the color out. And when you put these two images side by side, you get some nice consistent colors and exposures. The histograms are different but similar. And you can see the majority of our exposure falls in the same place. And I think we're off to a great start here. So that's my approach for that. Let's get on to the next shot, go back out on location.